Okay,
That's an important agenda.
it's 3 o'clock. This is the Rules Committee meeting of NARC. We note that I'm here. David Scott Hensley may or may not be here. He is the organizer of the call. He's gone now. Uh, Dave Anderson, KG6NUO, a member of the committee, is here. Tim Sibbles, K6TRK, a member of the committee, is here. Jim Aspinwall, NO1PC. First, now I remember your call sign, Jim. A vice president of NARC is also on the call today. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here. What I have tried to do in the last week is get everything that we've talked about and said we want to do into one document. Now, Word being what it is, the formatting got all screwed up, the numbering got all screwed up. There is an outside possibility that I have lost something. I will go back to the original documents, and if something is lost, I'll put it back in, and everybody will be notified of that. Right now, the document here on the screen that you have received an email is what I believe we as a committee have discussed and approved, and that if this document were cleaned up, this is the document we would send on to the board and to the members. So just so you know where I think we are. After this, we will talk about anything else we want to do in terms of additions, subtractions, whatever. When this is turned in, we have fulfilled our obligation from 2013. First thing, we've talked about this. I didn't remember a great deal of the talk, but I did get an email from Dave Anderson suggesting the removal of the word guidelines, because these aren't guidelines, darn it, these are the rules. It's not just a good idea, it's the law. Is everybody cool with removing the word guidelines? I will take that as a yes. Okay.
Okay,
now
I would qualify it with one item, though, David. I pointed out one section where that word also appears in the same type of context.
Well, I need to go through word by word and make sure all the references work, and there are no. By approving this, anywhere guidelines appears, we will remove it.
Well, David, you can have in your PNP, you can have a section of guidelines within it, but these are not policy and procedure guidelines. These are policies and procedures which may contain guidelines. So removing it from the title is appropriate.
Well, and the best practices that we've talked about adding, could be best practices guidelines as an appendix. So, yeah, you're absolutely correct, Jim. On item number 3, this is an item that we have wordsmithed a great deal. I changed, as you'll see, I got rid of the first sentence, as we discussed last week. Then I wordsmithed while formulating to in the formulation. The reason for that is I don't want it to appear that we are creating by ourselves regional band plans. So in the formulation doesn't say that we're the ones doing it, and it highlights the working cooperatively with others. I
think that was one of the conditions that we discussed last week, and that being that we weren't to be taking the lead.
Yeah, I believe that too, which is why I made this change. If anybody opposes this change where I say in the formulation as opposed to while formulating, now's the time to speak up.
I agree with it.
I agree too. I just want to make sure. I want this document, when it is finished, for every member of this committee and everybody who's been on our calls almost to be able to stand up and say, I support this. We all worked on it together. It's a good document. So I very much want to have, I figure if Jim and I both stand up and say we think it's a good deal, people will fall over and just vote for the thing. Continuing. NARC is a certified, I don't know what certified means, so I would recommend removing the word certified and just say we're a member. I mean, so what is certification for that? Okay, continuing.
I don't know where in the world we came up with that, David, but the only thing that we could claim in that as a substitute is we were a charter member, but I'm not sure we want to post it because essentially we may not want to take credit for that organization.
I think just being a member is just fine. Anybody?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I mean,
Again,
we're just talking about an introductory thing. We're not talking about holding us accountable for anything.
no, I'm just making sure that everybody's cool with any little changes that I myself made. Okay, now on number 3, I don't like this wording, and Tim, maybe you can wordsmith this. We wanted to get rid of the word guaranteed. The original change was just to change guaranteed into granted. And then it says by, I think it says the FCC, Part 97, and I wanted to kind of say by the FCC in part, and I need to change it to Federal Communications Commission in Part 97 of its rules and regulations. Just to make sure.
I would think of leave FCC out of it entirely. Just say that it's granted in Title 47, Part 97, U.S. Code.
Would you send that to me? I will make that.
Yeah,
I think that's a good change.
Yeah, because it's not, that's not an FCC document. That is a Code of Federal Regulation that is maintained by other people.
I thought there was something better to be said, and Tim will help me say it. Harmful interference. This is the definition we have been using. Is there anything wrong with this definition, or anything we're not capturing that we should be capturing?
Is that the legal definition according to the FCC?
No, it's more restrictive than the FCC.
Okay, that's where we get into trouble.
No, we can be more restrictive than the FCC.
Okay,
I think I hear Dave
question.
Anderson. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and this is what I had brought up there at the end, is if it's at least encapsulates the FCC definition to the point where if we have an enforcement issue that we need to get the cooperation of the FCC or whatever we need to point fingers at, reference to, it should be in our document. And if this fits that mold, then I think we're great.
Just a point to put things in the appropriate frame of reference. Remember, gentlemen, we're setting standards for granting a coordination, which is not a right. We are not telling people that they cannot put their repeater up, that they cannot operate outside of it. We're only saying that we will not grant a coordination for that.
Okay.
And I think we need to remember in that context, if we were denying people the ability to have a repeater, that's one thing, but we're not.
Nuisance interference, that's again the current standard. If we really wanted to change these, I would say we'd have to do it separately from this let's fix it and make it right from 2013. But is this okay? Nuisance
Just for
interference,
information,
okay.
the commission doesn't define nuisance. It only defines harmful.
Okay, continuing. No changes in any of this as we talked. So we go down to technical committee. Mr. Aspinwall, once again, is this the definition, and is this technical committee what you want it to say?
Well, he provided the language. I would imagine it would be.
I want to make sure it didn't get changed, something didn't get lost, that this is okay.
Yep.
Okay, just wanting to make sure.
Okay. Quick question before you move on.
Sure, Dave.
Back to definitions.
Okay, backing up.
And I apologize because I missed last week, but I had mentioned the possibility of adding tech rep or rather than just an org rep in there especially because of the fact that we do have a delineation in the database. And with Tim here, I think he might be able to best answer whether that would be an advisable inclusion.
In all honesty, Dave, I don't have an answer for that. In some cases, having the ability to communicate with the tech rep can be quite good because they're quite knowledgeable. But in some cases, it's a curse because the tech rep just thinks he knows a whole lot, and that creates major problems.
I mean,
Right.
do we want to create a specific role for tech reps in any NARC process? I don't think we do. I think they're useful as a resource, but I don't think we want to say, and NARC shall communicate with either the org rep or the tech rep, or that the tech rep should speak on technical terms. I mean, only one person can be responsible for coordination.
And based on the last few years that I've had to deal with this, I would say right now, unless we run into a problem, I would probably be in favor of leaving things the way they are, leave the official, essentially of course we'd have to define that, but leave the official responding responsibilities to the primary rep, and just leave the technical rep as a resource. Somebody we could call on if we had to.
Okay.
We welcome Tim Barrett to the call. Mr. Barrett. Continuing now, and again, Dave, I understand. I get why we might want to do it, but we should think about it. But it's not. I think we should think about it. I'll just leave it at that.
I think we need to give it a whole lot more thought.
Yeah.
Right. No, and I mean, if the coordinators are fine with just the ability of the org rep passing the baton to the tech rep when they have a phone call, and you call up and you say, "Are you doing this?" And in my case, I more than likely may not have the technical answer for you, and have to defer it to the tech rep. But I agree, we need to keep it very super simple.
I am backing up because I touched something and it went away. Sorry.
Let's hope temporarily.
Sorry I'm late.
Not a problem, Tim. Welcome aboard. Repeater
I may end up going
technicals.
away. I got Comcast here looking at some stuff. So
Lucky you on a Sunday too. Repeater technical standards. On this, I will yield to some combination of Tim and Jim.
Proceed, Jim. If he's still here.
Yeah, Mr. Aspinwall may have left us. Notice I'm making it 1-21.
Sorry, had to take care of something.
Technical standards.
Hello. Yes.
Well, that's where we are, and I was asking you and Mr. Civils to offer your thoughts about all of this. Section 4.
So this should be a tech committee discussion because we Tim, is this 4 kilohertz applicable to only those 15 kilohertz splits, or is that everything?
4 kilohertz was intended at the time to apply to everything because digital voice didn't exist at the time, or at least it didn't in our world. It works fine for 20 kilohertz. It's kind of pushing the borderline on 15 kilohertz. Actually, it would be probably closer to 3.8. But at the time, back in the 90s, it covered everything just fine.
Okay.
In other words, it's seriously out of date. Although we would have less problems if they did abide by it. I know of a lot of people on 15 kilohertz, including some of our prominent members, that are operating at 5+.
Yeah, and this is where we need to glue down to must, should, may, or whatever, and decide, because we're popping machines in at 12.5 and coordinating them, which, you know, gives a whole different meaning to
Obviously, a system set up for a 25 kilohertz spacing and operating properly is not going to stay within the 12.5 kilohertz spacing without causing problems to somebody.
Right.
Would the
Especially
coordination,
geographically close to each other.
would the coordination and technical committees, are you all able to consider this at all so that it might get changed at the April meeting, or is that just impossible?
Well, now that we've hit this piece of it, that gives something readily identifiable to go address.
Okay. Well, I will, and I think that probably has to be voted upon separately. It's like a new issue that isn't part of what we did a year ago. So that can be a whole separate item. Mm-hmm. But I've heard enough complaint about 4 kilohertz that I wonder if now is the time to go to 3.8 or whatever the number should be.
Well, I think what we do when we have got a set of standards is we defer this section to an attachment, an addendum, you know, please refer to technical standards respective to your band of operation, you know, your band and mode of operation, document such and such, and, you know, get out of this document with some of these things.
Well, I think that's a year or two away, so I'm wondering what we do in April.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, if I don't know what the percentages are here, but I would say the vast majority of hams have dual band radios. Most ham radios, the deviation control on the user radio is not different for the VHF than the UHF in a dual band radio. It's common to both bands. So, and of course, similarly, let's say that in a 2-meter radio, let's say it's 2-meter only, the likelihood is that they're working some of the 145 repeaters. They're also working some of the 146, 147 repeaters. Currently, one is at 20 kc spacing that could tolerate more deviation than the ones that are at 15. But again, that the deviation control is common to the radio, let's say in this case, at that band. So how do you kind of micromanage a deviation number in different parts of a band or in different bands when these conditions exist?
Well, you're talking about the difference between a repeater station, which if somebody, I go back to my HR2. First of all, there really isn't a deviation control in most of the radios people are using. And you know, not like in the days that some of us are used to hard limiting, but that's a very interesting point. That what's the effect going to be of a user radio? And we've never done anything about user radios. This is talking about the deviation of the repeater transmitter.
I'd have to tend to agree. What we're dealing with is I don't think it's as much the issue of the user's radio, because that's going to be very difficult to limit or control, or whatever words you choose to. I don't know that there's a one that's not clumsy in that situation, but we can say that the repeater which rebroadcasts it can limit that to some state or form, to where we're not broadcasting from a 4,000-foot hilltop at more than 5 kilohertz on a 15 kilohertz spaced area. And most repeaters do have the ability, if not multiple places, because you would have the transmitter board, and you would also have the controller where you could probably limit or control in both places.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if the transmitter won't limit, there's nothing the controller is going to do about that.
It's going to limit the audio level.
No, it won't.
Yeah, it will.
Oh yeah, my controller can make your audio sound like nothing.
Well,
It can turn you down to a whisper.
It
Yeah.
can attenuate you, but it does not. It cannot limit you. It's a linear device. There's no limitation in there. You shove 15 at it, and depending on whether you're Unity or whatever. So let's not confuse hard limiting.
The same difference is true if you don't have a Motorola repeater too. Because there's other repeaters out there that don't have limiting; they just have audio control.
Yep.
You'll
So
learn something new every day.
in some fashion, the repeater operator, the repeater owner, the engineer of the system who puts it up, may or may not have control over that bandwidth. We're asking them to, but we can't guarantee it depending on which user radio comes into the system.
Well, the other thing is it really doesn't. It at some point it has to interfere with somebody before it becomes an issue anyway. Because we're not running around monitoring everybody. We're responding basically to interference complaints.
But this also, though, defines good practice. And my repeaters are running at 3.8, and because that's what's been recommended. But I can jack mine up if you want.
Yeah, well, I think the whole basis point of and Part 97 is just nebulous enough about this that says measures as may be necessary to minimize interference. So, all we can do is provide a guideline and say, if you got an interference issue, you guys got to work it out yourselves. But here's, we may be able to help identify the cause of the interference, but I think a provision in maintaining a coordination is that you do not have an outstanding FCC complaint against you, which we can find out about.
Maybe.
Because we may be drawn into the argument before the FCC gets involved.
In most cases, you are, because a lot of cases, the FCC is not going to respond until the thing gets completely out of control.
That's right. But if there is a complaint on register, and that's a public record, but there's all kinds of ways to spin that. I agree that there should be guidelines, and if it ever escalated to the FCC or between two parties, and we can come up with measurements, we can say, well, yeah, this is technically what we found. Here's a recommendation to resolve. We could take it on our own, and this is base some rules around this. If we find such a case, what are we going to do about it? We're going to drop your coordination, or we can put you into pending status again. We're going to drop your coordination. Or we can put you
Dave and UO, I think you were trying to say something. Dave and UO, I think you were trying to say something.
Well, I have a question. I think we're grasping as to what the bandwidth, the audio bandwidth should be, I think, or the bandwidth on the repeater output. Can we take that and go over and look at the equivalent of what the commercial side of things are defining this at, and maybe use that as a guideline to either take off from or and see if that will fit.
Well, I tried that and got shot in the ass because we've got nothing to do with Part 90. So that's been out there.
The other concern that I have about that, Dave, is there are some things in the commercial world that are so tightly regulated that what you do, in my opinion, and I'll qualify it with that, Jim, my opinion, you cross the line where you start knocking out people that are hobbyists. And remember that this service is all about hobbyists.
Well, and that's why it comes down to guidelines that whether we attribute it to some other reference or not, if somebody asks us what best practice is, empirical best practice is a well-engineered commercial system based on a whole bunch of engineering parameters, and you can either accept those or not as how you operate your system. If you want not to have a best engineered system as set by millions of dollars worth of example, it's a hobby. That's fine. By the same token, If you want to be out there at 6 kilohertz, 2.5 kc off frequency, your coordination's gone. We're not going to support that. We're not, I wouldn't sanction that operation. That's, that's being not a good neighbor in the whole context of this entire thing. So that's
Just the discussion at this point seems to be on where we draw the line.
And that's beyond what we're doing in this document today. Right. So yeah. I'm going to hope that the coordination and tech committees will work on this. Item 2 is no change. Item 3 is no change. In section 5,
Dave, I would. There's a awkward whether it's actionable or not wording in section 3.
Okay, what is it?
Well, all stations will have. That sounds like a marketing claim that somebody is saying. When I build my system, we will have all system. We can only make a recommendation, and will is not the proper word to have in here. If we were going to do a set of hard recommendations, the word would be must, or shall, to be a little softer. Same thing, but all stations should.
No,
should would be a recommendation.
Yeah, should's a recommendation. Should is not real strong. Do you want should?
But we don't
must?
have those. We don't have those technical specifications at this point to back up a shall.
If you go to section 1. Receiver RF and IF stages should be designed, not will or must or shall. Section 2 is number 2 there. Systems should be configured to be one-on-one. So we can't tell people what to build their machine out of.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure.
Until we have some hard technical specs, I think we should stick with the should. And when we have some specs that we can offer, then maybe we can alter it at that time.
Okay. Down into 5.
I'm not done yet.
Okay, sorry, Jim.
So the last sentence is, it is a condition of coordination that the repeater operator will adhere to the standards of good engineering. I think in maintaining a coordination, that's worded differently, but I think that should be another paragraph, make it a 4.
Okay.
It is a condition of coordination that the repeater operator should adhere to.
Should? Okay. I think we're watering this down.
I would think shall might be better.
No, shall's a must.
I would prefer shall.
Shall is not optional.
Shall is a mandate.
Shall is a must.
No, I agree, but I think.
Let me finish the sentence.
Okay, go ahead.
Should adhere to good engineering practice. Get rid of the standards of, because we haven't established what those standards are.
And I'm going to get rid of the quote marks and just make it good engineering practices.
Yes.
Whatever that means, that's what it is.
Then you also want to get rid of the ahead of it.
Okay, you're correct.
I mean, until we get membership agreement that everybody's going to spend $1,000 on a set of bottles and have a professional engineer design their system, we can't do the must or shall.
Well,
yeah, but you're talking about practices. And practices, I don't think cost money. I mean, if you abide by good practices, you're not. I mean, that's what you're doing. You're not requiring the investment.
I'm buying isolators and they cost money. So, anything else with this section? Okay, on digital or coded squelch, I notice in section A there that we are requiring CTCSS. Yet I don't hear very much of it. Or DCS. I've never used a repeater that was DCS. But I don't hear us doing anything about enforcing that.
and we don't talk about input and or output specifically.
Well, CTCSS is output and input.
Which side of my system do I need to have it on? I should have it on both input and output, but are you dictating an access control mechanism, or are you dictating a nuisance interference protection?
It has been and maybe I got the definition wrong, is that CTCSS refers to a system with a tone on both the input and output.
No.
Doesn't have to be.
No, it has to be the type of tone that it's decoding, either on the repeater end or the receiver end, or the user end.
So this sentence is bad one way or the other. So what should it say?
It was originally intended to be used on the input of the repeater. Where the discussion seems to be for now is whether we go the next step and require it require the repeater to also transmit a tone. God knows there's no way we can regulate and make users use it, but we could require that they transmit it anyway. But at this point, the intent of this was the input of the repeater was to be tone squelched.
So in that context, David, the wording just before A, NARCC specifies that should be NARCC recommends that the use of blah 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 be applied to both the input and the output of the system.
Are we not going to require it on the input?
Nope.
Why not?
I disagree fervently on that one.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't want a bunch of carrier
all right.
squelch repeaters.
And that's where we got to break down the wording. That's fine. Sometimes you've got to throw a bad penny in there to gum up the works. So we need language to the effect. I could say verbiage, but it may be. But language to the effect of NARCC requires the use of CTCSS or digital coded squelch, both are the industry standard generic, on the input of all voice systems. B, well,
That's what I'm trying to capture.
well, that's why I want them separate pieces. So I would drop the NARCC specifies that, or grab that piece from above and put it into A and say NARCC requires that. Yep. Little heading loss there, but okay. And do a specific call out that it's required on the input, and a separate call out that it is recommended on the output.
We could add a sentence at the end of that section saying that NARCC additionally recommends that it transmit a tone.
I like them separate so people can tear them apart as separate items without mixing the metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
Because, when we get into these arguments about things, we take them en masse and we blow away an entire paragraph, and we lose a good point because it's bound to a bad point. It's also easier to manage the argument if you stay in context of one section.
Like that?
Yep.
Okay. Then it is acceptable. That needs to become item 3, and I will just fix that as it comes around. I mean, I think that just needs to go to
Just
the left.
outdent it. Yeah, outdent it, indent it, whatever.
Yeah, let me find my outdents. Wow, I
Didn't auto number. Oh, nice. Okay.
I'm going to fix it. This is what you like about using, and so now we have that stupid line there. So I'll fix this, and I'm going to type it in, and I will deal with it that way. Okay,
That's
I will
right.
fix that. Okay.
Word seems to have problems with things like that. I've got some regulated documents I've been dealing with and trying to maintain hierarchy of them because somebody made a custom template.
Oh, yeah.
Just sucks. But anyway.
Indeed. Okay, good. We'll fix that. Technical best practices, we don't have any, so that needs to go away. At some point, we may have some, but it should probably be an addendum when we do. So that will go away. Coordination committee, no changes here, except that I need to fix some of the spacing and stuff. Tim, tell me about the coordination committee.
Pretty much represents the way it should be. Let's see, pressure the board. I don't think I saw anything in there that's out of line at all at this point.
Okay.
Anything I don't think anything that requires an immediate emergency fix. Let's put it that way.
So a matter of housekeeping is about there's a reference to board that is lowercase in.
Yeah, I need to make them all upper or all lower. So yeah, I need to go through and figure out what should be upper and what should be lower. You're absolutely correct. I'm going to probably default to lower. Okay, coordination service. And then it's the part that we kind of referred to earlier is item 2, in which we do add some touchy-feely coordination criteria. And to be honest, I think it's good that we have some. But I think Jim was talking about this earlier. So Jim, what's your thought?
Well, I have never in my experience, I don't know that there's a mechanism for a weighting, a preference factor in granting a coordination. So, and I certainly wouldn't expect any. We have no way to verify that you're an Aries or Races affiliate, other than you're presenting a letter that we can't verify the source of.
I will go one step into this thing and say that in the past we have not had to use this.
It's sort of a tiebreaker.
What essentially, well, how we view this is if you file, Jim, if you file for a coordination in San Jose and David files for a coordination in Fremont on the same day, this could be the tiebreaker.
It could be if we had coordination rules. How are we going to use this?
Only when we had to, because we, like I said, again, we never have.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tiebreaker. I mean, that's just, we don't have many ties.
Is this a factor in the Solano County issue that came up before, that somebody was or wasn't, since there was a county entity involved in that?
Nope, because both of them were emergency services groups.
Yeah.
I'm reluctant to...
Basically both of them were equal when it comes to this list.
So I just built a repeater. How are you going to verify my number of users since it just got put on the air the day I made my application? I could not have applied without putting it on the air. I'm evolving a club, which I could say is going to have 40,000 users over the course of the next year. Prove it or disprove it.
It was real easy. If you change from 200 watts to 250 watts, that forces a recoordination. Now, let's say MDARC up on top of South Peak of Diablo decides that they want to do that. I think it's real easy to say that they have far more users than Joe Blow's repeater that just went up in the valley over there in the valley floor.
So we're going to do a population density study overlaid on a coverage.
Oh, I think it's real easy to call that one.
So the guy in Fremont toss out Aries races, Aries being a nebulous construct. I'm Campbell Aries races, the other guy's Fremont Aries races. We just both went on the air. How many users have we got?
Well, here's the alternative, the way I see it, Jim. We can abolish this section 2 with all of its subsections, and just make it a subjective guesstimate on the part of the coordinator.
Well, what I'm trying to do is let's factor in, you know, how are we going to prove or disprove some of these criteria?
It's
What's
like
our mechanism?
probably going to end up being about the same situation that we get into without it. At some point, you're not going to be able to do away with all subjective items when it comes to this or other things. At some point, the coordinator is going to have to make some kind of an independent decision. We can't make all of it robotic and automatic.
All right, David. I'm not saying strike this out. It's
I don't want to strike out the whole thing, but listening to Tim, I think we just make it so that we have this kind of omnibus, interest, convenience, and necessity, and get rid of the individual measures of that and let the coordinators use their best judgment.
Well, we do consider power and location as part of the process because it's a matter of anticipated interference. So that's,
yeah, but that's already covered elsewhere.
okay. So I mean, I'm good with leaving A in there, and you know this.
The thing that scares me about this as a coordinator, if I have to ever fall back on this, which it would require basically 2 or 3 people applying at the same time and overlapping coverage, basically I'm going to have to decide amongst them who deserves to have it more than the other one. And
Well,
of course,
also
I don't know if that doesn't spell trouble to you guys. It certainly does to me.
Well,
Well,
but then,
I don't want you to have to make that argument. You know, that's why I don't think we help or harm that particular case striking out the following points. I don't know.
Read the next sentence where it says may not be first come first served. So theoretically, somebody could come in after somebody got on the air and filed for coordination and put their bigger repeater on the air and say, I have better coverage, I have this, I have that, you should grant mine out of order because they are not allocated strictly on first come first served.
Okay, so what I would do with this is take that sentence, coordination may not necessarily blah blah blah, make that A. That's a very important factor to introduce this topic. And then to qualify that sentence is A, the current A.
Hold on, let me do this then.
Because we make a claim of what we do after we justify it.
Okay, I'm working on it. I'm working
Okay.
on it.
That's all right. But I think
It's
it reads better this way.
Yeah, it does. I think that makes it clearer what happens. So
Great.
it's A and B, and then get rid of all the examples or not?
I'm okay leaving them
David,
in.
I have a question.
Yeah, Tim.
I'm sorry. I've been back and forth on on listening and not listening because some other stuff going around here with the Comcast people, but they're done. But if we look at Part 97, the definition of what a frequency coordinator is, there's no language there that, at least that I can see, that talks about really any of this. About what in other words, none of the stuff that's here, the number of users, the number of coordinated stations here. I mean, none of that has any bearing on what definition 22 is.
Well, that's true, Tim. And I think that's why the FCC lets us decide within our respective communities how that criteria will vet itself out in the end. So, that not everything here.
While it doesn't apply, while it Well, it doesn't appear in 97. There also is nothing in 97 that prohibits us from making it a condition.
That's true. And
I absolutely agree with that. Yes.
Yeah.
No, but nowhere in 97 does it say what we have to consider to grant it.
Yeah. So yeah, conditions of merit. I think everybody, as I recall, probably has some boilerplate along the lines of 2A, 2B, and this is why we exist, and this is what we want to accomplish, and then leave the details of coordination process in process, not specifically here.
I wonder, should we pull D, number of coordinated stations? It's not obvious to me what that means or why it matters.
Because if you've got 6 repeaters in the Bay Area, why do you need a 7th one? Or if you have 6 repeaters across the state, why do you need a 7th one? And across, I would, if I was going to leave D in there, it would be number of coordinated stations in the coverage area, in the same coverage area.
I tell you what, David, I will agree to reduction to the present A and B that you have cited right now, and the removal of the stuff below, but reserving the right to come back to the committee at some later point and say this isn't working, we need to rework this a little bit more.
Oh yeah, yeah. I expect that there are conditions of merit that may or may not, come about. And if somebody's going to, I think if you get into a contention with one of these, that would almost be something that somebody would pull up to the board.
Okay. Dave, NUO, as a member of the committee, what would you like us to do?
I think I would tend to take out from C down,
Okay.
with maybe the possible exception of H and I, but those two I'm kind of neutral on.
Well, power and location is a factor of coordination.
Stated elsewhere.
Yeah, stated elsewhere.
Stated elsewhere, though.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, having it placed here may or may not be, advantageous. But
Well, we have to make sure that it does not conflict with where it's covered elsewhere, and to an advantage or disadvantage one way or the other. So if it is covered elsewhere, where it's more appropriate to define those aspects in text specs or something else. Again, if it's elsewhere, because otherwise you got to jump from this section to the other section and figure out which one takes precedence.
Yeah, we should not repeat ourselves.
Right. No, and if it actually is a condition, consideration, and it's stated elsewhere, maybe we should refer to that elsewhere location just to make sure that people understand this is part of their, what's being considered.
If we want to add cross references, let's do it later. Later in this process perhaps, but not right this second, because then we have to dig through the whole document and figure out what that should be. Is anyone opposed to section 2 here as it now appears?
Yes.
You need to strike one more sentence where your cursor is right now.
Okay, where?
Where your cursor is flashing.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
moved
Because
it.
it's now, gotcha.
You moved it.
Mr. Barrett is opposed to this.
Well, then you need to change the sentence that you moved up, because that doesn't make any sense the way it reads, because it was below, so therefore when it says with the consideration above, actually
okay.
It should be a period.
Yeah, and then just drop it after that. You're correct.
Yep. Good.
Yep.
Good call.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Thank you, Tim.
No problem.
Okay. And there will be a period right here.
Yep.
Good. Fewer words is better.
Considering the audience, yes.
Maybe we should just, never mind. We can just put out policies and procedures. Do as we tell you.
I always think of the wise man that used to advise everyone that the more complicated that you make the plumbing, the easier it is to stop it up.
Okay. Now, let's go to item 3. where the
I think it ought to be presented in Comic Sans Serif in purple.
yeah, hold on. We ought to do it with bubbles over people's heads. I'm thinking about a repeater. Item number 3. I don't know that the first sentence needs to be there. And the important part of it is applications for coordination must follow whose band plan?
Well, if that sentence is to make sense, applications for coordination must follow the band plan for 29. Applications for coordination in 29 megahertz must follow the band plan established in 2006. But is that qualified elsewhere? Because if we're going to coordinate there, you should be in the band plan. Well, you know, actually, well, this isn't any different than any other declaration or practice of following a band plan for coordination. So, Tim, why is this here?
Because the old good old boys bunch way back when decided it was necessary. That's another one of the Don Smith era things. It really needs to be reworded to basically point to whatever the currently accepted band plan is, and that's going to be a tricky one because when we're talking about currently accepted, it's currently accepted by who? Just us or the amateur community as a whole?
Yeah, well, that's why I wonder why we even bother to call out just 29 megahertz
and above, Jim, and above.
Oh.
They're basically saying that we don't care what happens below 29. That part I understand.
We don't coordinate anything below 29.
Exactly.
I think we could get rid of the first sentence and just say, you must follow the current NARCC band plan.
There you go.
And that says that NARCC will have a band plan. And, but
David,
it doesn't, yes,
how about the current? How about
What?
the current NARCC or posted NARCC band plan?
How about the attached addendum band plan?
Currently posted. If we say attached, then we sort of make it part of the P&Ps.
Well, is there a way that we can attach it which would allow the membership or whoever is responsible for adopting this band plan within NARCC to update it just like they can update the technical specifications?
Yeah, I like that sentence the way it is, and here's one of the things where we could get called on our butts for this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is going to be a touchy one.
We have not modified the 440 band plan yet. We are coordinating the 12.5 kilohertz.
Yeah. Jim, this gets into the everything that we do ought to be in the P&Ps.
Rather than posted, should we say then adopted?
No, it hasn't been adopted. I mean, if we don't want to run into a foul of the 12.5 kilohertz on 440, we should just remove this item.
I thought the 12.5 kilohertz was adopted last year by the general membership.
Not in the band plan.
No. 12.5 was, I think, went to the board. But the bottom line here is, if you remove it, you're basically opening up the door, and I'm sure Tim would love to see this, to coordinating any place in the band we wanted to, except the 2 exclusionary zones. This is the only thing that keeps the coordinator from coordinating out of the coordinating out of the repeater subbands.
I actually wouldn't like to see that, just for the record. Because if you guys did do that, there would be no reason to have NCDCC.
Well, then we could merge. End of story.
Well, there would be nothing to merge. The organization would cease to have a purpose.
It can't just outright be eliminated because we don't. And this is one of the concerns that I have. One of the concerns that Steve Allred has. What happens after we go? I know I have ethics and I want to see things done fairly. What about the next guy? There's no guarantee that he will play when given these great big open discretions, that he will play by good ethics. And I think that opens up too big of a can of worms if we just do away with it altogether.
Yeah, all I wanted to do is to have the sentence make sense and find out if there's another unmentioned condition or reason for that. So I think I think we're just cleaning up this sentence making.
I think it's still necessary.
No, and I agree. It should be there. I'm trying to. When I see currently posted where? Who determines it to be posted there?
Well, I wouldn't say posted because you have to define posted, but the current NARCC band plans. Don't overqualify something because then once you qualify it, then you got to qualify it.
I agree. That was somebody we had talked about. What's current and how do you know? That would be. I mean that. I think that accomplishes.
Current implies that it had been accepted by NARCC.
Okay, that's fine.
Yep.
Okay, item 4, no changes in item 4. Item 5 sort of gives me the willies there at the end. And I would think it would give Jim the willies too.
Which section is that, David? Be
C.
more specific.
C.
Oh, C in its entirety?
Yeah.
Well, can I just ask a I guess a framing question to all this?
Sure.
I mean, we all know that today that there are stations, and it's not just a couple here and there, that there are numerous stations that don't follow the technical specifications that NARCC has published. And we've had some conversations about that says, well, some people believe we don't really have any enforcement capabilities. Others don't want us to have any enforcement capabilities. The bottom line is we've never enforced it. So
well, that's true. And
are we going to?
Yeah. That's where.
That's basically, Tim, what's going to end up happening here. What you're saying, enforcing it. Actually, we can't enforce it. All we can do is say you have strayed from the conditions of your coordination, which include these technical requirements. Therefore, we're going to withdraw the coordination, and that's the limit to what we can do. We cannot.
That's where the coordination
enforce it per se.
Right. That's where
That's it.
The details of the coordination process, and again, the coordination maintenance, is if people are looking for a clear definition of why did I lose my coordination or how do I lose my coordination, and some of that is Q&A, FAQ stuff that others have published, is a process to hold people accountable, and that is to say, we recommend 4 kilohertz, and we are not, again, above, we did not do, you must be at plus or minus 4 kilohertz in X part of segment. We said, you should. Until we strengthen the language above to be shall and require it, then we can't go into the next step of dropping somebody's coordination to pending, because the membership is not accepted must in any of this. And until they do, we can't have language that allows us to very logically, objectively say, well, we have 4 independent verifications, your deviation is too high, we're dropping your coordination pending until it's fixed. That would be a matter of, you're not the boss of me, you can't tell me what to do, which is what we should be trying to do here is instill some discipline of this nature, but there's not a whole lot of disciplinary bite in this until
we have firm tech standards.
The only disciplinary bite I've ever seen exercised is if you move your machine from one hill to the other and get caught doing it, and don't report it, don't go through the pending process again on a move.
Then I'm not arguing with any of this. Then if that is the condition that we exist under and what we're going to exist under, then there's no point in 5 period.
No, we can leave 5 and 5A and then get rid of B and C.
Okay, now understand, this was all put in place with the anticipation that the technical committee was going to provide those hard technical standards to base it upon.
Right, David, because what you've got here is a result of trying to start, trying to attack this when we thought we were going to get technical standards. So some of this is, and I don't have the old one in front of me to know which pieces of this are new and why they were put in there.
This is all new.
It's
Okay.
all new.
The entirety of 5 was added in support of the technical committee.
on that premise. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I agree. We can't spell out things that we haven't defined, that we don't have a process or a definition for.
Well, what I would like to do is basically make it that and get rid of what is now marked as B and C. Make that 5.
I think that would be a different. I think taking B and C out, if you take it out, you're going to have trouble pushing it back in when time comes back and the technical standards come back. At least this way you have fair warning.
Well, you're basically telling them you have the right to update and change things, which pretty much most all coordinators make that statement.
I don't like B because of the 5 years. The way it sits now, I don't like the 5 years.
Yeah, we can't use that B because we don't have anything to go on. So that goes away right now because we just haven't made the progress to use it. Existing.
Well,
I still think we get the benefit. I think we still get the benefit just by the primary paragraph.
That could be, yes.
So I'm going to get rid of this and leave it that way. Because we do say that after we change the rules, you have to comply. What we don't address is you already have a repeater. When do you have to comply? And I think that whenever we have tech specs, we'll be putting in an implementation plan with the specs.
Well, we'll negotiate that time. I mean, if it's just a matter of, completely rebanding is going to be more time-consuming and expensive than a deviation adjustment or something else.
If there is a need for a time where existing coordination holders that have been coordinated in there for a while need to be given a time to comply with an overall general technical specification of some sort, we can add it at that time. This is intended to be a fluid document, so those sections theoretically could be added right back in if necessary.
Absolutely.
And just sent back to the board. So under current situations today, what's there right now fits.
Let us also remember this is going to require membership approval. So fewer things that the members are going to object to in this version of the document is good.
Yep. That's fine.
Because the board could then later change the P&Ps on its own, should we ever develop the manhood to do that. Okay, so here's item 6. No changes. On item 7, does what we've already changed not address this?
Hang on. Let's go back to 6 for a second.
Okay.
We talk about. Just a minute. Never mind. It's there. Okay.
Should I say on input and or output, or should anything about I change? 6I?
Oh yeah. Well, since we require we require it. Well,
No, we should. We don't require. We should it. No, we do require it on the input.
One of the problems that we've had is that in the past it's been interpreted, and I insert the word interpreted, to be a requirement at coordination time, and that we haven't covered making it an ongoing thing. So if somebody decides to turn it off and ignore it, there isn't much we can do about it, or at least that's what the perception has been. If you were going to strengthen any of this type of thing, as it sits right now, this has to do with what happens when it's coordinated during the coordination process.
all right. So to match the above section, or to be consistent with it, this should say use of CTSS or DCS on the system input.
System input, right. That would clarify it. And it would still, this section would only apply to the coordination point of time of coordination anyway, the way it's written.
Then we get into coordination maintenance. So
right, that's where we have to improve coordination maintenance.
We can throw it in
Okay.
there too.
Okay, so this is okay now.
Yes,
Okay.
that's what the intent has been.
Okay, just making sure. And 7 then still is okay. Okay, let's go to section 8. I'll bring it all up on screen. There are no changes to that, although I think something moved. I think field tests may be required, got moved. I do believe there were some additions to this, and I'm going to have to mark them up, but this is basically what we were given as the document.
Yeah, if I were to make any changes for that, I would not be as loose as periodically identifying. I would say legally identifying. But that's just me.
Yeah, that field test thing has existed for a long time. That was one of the things that was reordered to make it make more sense.
Board coordination granted. So this is really not the procedure. This is requirements for obtaining a coordination or conditions for obtaining a coordination, but it is not the procedure. There is no written procedure for obtaining a coordination.
No, that is an ongoing thing that coordination committee's trying to come up with.
There we go. We'll fix that. No, but we have coordination conditions above. Should we just make all of this one big happy section?
Well, coordination conditions could theoretically be interpreted as ongoing, whereas conditions to obtain would be a one-time requirement.
Should this be a requirement up here?
Yes. Conditions is really a soft word.
Well, yeah, and then we can do conditions for obtaining. We have requirements and we have conditions. Is this okay? Anybody?
Well, the posting has always been a requirement.
I think we get into that later. I don't like the word noticing.
4B is basically the same as what we tell them we're posting. It's that the NARCC membership of NARCC has been notified, which is essentially the same as posting for the 60 days any of the coordinations except for the links.
Yeah, number one of conditions needs to change because D-star repeaters do not voice ID or CW ID. They digitally ID.
I thought they voice ID'd. I'm sorry.
Nope.
Do they legally identify?
People can add a script that does that.
Legally ID. Okay.
That's why I said we gotta get out of what we don't define that other than
And legally identifying what the repeater's call sign. Can I leave that?
Yep.
No, David, what we could do to that rather than just strike it, we could voice, comma, CWID, comma, or the equivalent for digital voice systems.
But they may be digital data systems or the equivalent for digital systems.
Yes.
Okay, I can do this.
How about keep it just on any allowable?
Must legally identify. Must legally identify, and then we're overqualifying it. Must legally identify. Why add more words?
Yeah, we were aiming that way earlier. We can stick to that theme.
Legally identify and get rid of everything else.
Thinking of the Dilbert bubble.
Yeah, the KISS mandate.
Yep. Okay.
But my repeater's complicated. You can't make it simple.
Give me a ball peen hammer and I can.
All paid hammer.
Can make
I
a
use a
repeater
10.
very
I use a 10-pound sledge to do that. It also removes a lot of frustration of the operator.
Okay, continue. Is all the rest of this okay? May be reviewed or shall be reviewed in item 2. May be reviewed. In
Where are you seeing this?
disputes regarding the issuance. Disputes regarding the issue may be reviewed by the board. May be reviewed by the board.
Well,
Yes,
because the dispute resolution process requires them to consider it.
That's what I was wondering.
Will, it's our claim of what we will do. So will is the proper word.
Okay.
Yep, that fits.
Okay.
The paragraph before that, it
Yes.
says must be filed
Yes.
on the website. Is that not
Yes.
a coordination requirement?
That's why it says
Should that
must.
be up on the
That's why it
previous?
says- We could move it
Yeah,
up.
should that not be in the previous? Yeah, I'm thinking it should be in the previous section.
Anybody opposed to that? Anybody opposed to that?
Well, and so is legal ID. So we could.
When we start doing this, basically we're walking ourselves right into the corner of removing the heading number IX.
Yeah, I'm thinking we ought to just take that heading out.
What heading? This one?
IX.
That one right there.
Heading. This one? Okay.
IX.
And then change the numbering so all the numbering makes sense. Okay.
Exactly.
And they may need to get reordered, and you'll see it if I do any reordering. I'm just thinking somehow maybe they should be sort of chronologic or something.
Well, that's what we're getting to with steps. Now, when we do this, two things change are no longer requirements. Dispute is not a requirement for coordination. Neither is